Hi everyone, welcome to another 30 Goals Challenge presenter. And this is actually our closing keynote, and who is very, very inspirational. So Dan Haesler, where are you in the world right now?
Right now in the world, I am in Sydney, Australia, and it's a lovely 7 a.m. It looks like it's going to be a nice day. Just looking out the window, I can see not many clouds in the sky, so it should be a nice winter's day here in Australia.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. And other places, they keep saying how it is very, very hot. So
It's
right
not
now, I know there's
hot.
a lot of people wanting your weather. So as Dan gets his slides, I'm going to go ahead and I am going to let you know all about Dan. And there's a lot to share. I know we've heard a lot of stories from teachers everywhere, and Dan is sort of a rock star, but he does not act like it. He's very, very inspirational. He has talked along the lines of the Dalai Lama and with Sir Ken Robinson, but he is incredible. He is an international keynote speaker, educator, writer, and consultant. He's originally from Manchester, but currently in Sydney. And I was really excited because I got to meet him face to face just last month. So that was really nice. He works with schools across the country around issues of engagement, and you're going to see some really some research that he's done about the hardest to reach kids, that he's very passionate and runs a lot of projects with that. So I'm going to go ahead and let him inspire you. He also is consulted to federal and state governments, so and writes regularly for the Australian Teacher magazine. So Dan, I'm going to leave it up to you.
Thanks very much, Shelley, and thank you so much for anyone out there who's tuned in. It's really quite humbling to know that people sort of want to listen to your ideas and things like that. So I thought what we'd do this morning is chat a little bit about mindset, and I'm sure that you have heard a little bit about mindset. Maybe you've read Carol Dweck's book or whatnot. So I just wanted to sort of talk a little bit about that, and maybe talk a little bit about some of the implications of that in our schools and in our organisations, particularly working with young people. So as Shelley mentioned in the intro there, I work with schools across Australia, but not just schools. So, well, I work with like the whole range of schools, so like the richest schools through to the least affluent schools. But also, I find myself working on occasion with like homeless kids from youth off the streets or indigenous communities. And so, what we're going to talk about today, this mindset stuff, the fixed mindset, the growth mindset, it has implications. Not just in educational settings, but in social settings and cultural settings. So
Dan,
I thought what I'd do.
just real quick before you go on, can you I think when you click the screen share, can
Yeah.
you try doing the entire screen and then clicking the present mode? Because we see them, but they're the little slides.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So where do you want them? Sorry. You click screen share. Yeah.
And then do entire screen, or it says your entire. And then when you click play, it should put them all up.
Oh, okay. Hang on. Let me just stop screen sharing them for a second. So I've gone to screen share, and then it asks me the 30 goals, my PowerPoint. So I'm clicking on that.
No,
And
click
then
on the one that
if I
says
go,
entire screen
where's
or
sorry,
desktop.
Shelley.
It might say desktop.
Okay, let me try again. Okay, yes. Okay.
Okay, fantastic.
Entire screen. So now, if I do this, are you now seeing the whole screen?
Yes, it looks beautiful.
Yes?
Yes,
Okay, that's good
awesome.
news.
Thank you.
Okay, cool. Okay, yeah, so what I thought I'd do to start with is just share with you essentially what the foundational research, if you like, the research that really got Carol's books started, I guess. And that's where they took 400 kids of elementary age and gave them a test. And it was a standardized test. And what they did after the test was they split the group into two groups of 200. One group of kids were praised for their performance on the test because they must have done so well because they were so smart. So saying things, oh, you did so well, you're so intelligent, you're so smart, we're so proud of you. The other group of kids were praised for the effort that they put in, or the attitude they showed, or the persistence. And so both groups of kids were being praised, and both groups were told how proud the adults were of them, except in the first group, they were praised because they were smart, and in the second group, they were praised because they worked really hard. About 2 weeks after this, they gave the kids an opportunity to take another test, and they could have a choice. They could either take an easier test, or they could choose to take a harder test. And most of us who work with young people would say, well, that's a no-brainer, right? Most kids are going to take the easier test. But what they found was the group that had been praised for being really, really smart, 70% of those kids chose to take the easier test, whilst in the group that had been praised for working really hard and showing a good attitude and persevering, over 90% of those kids chose to take the harder test. And the only difference was the way that they'd been praised in the intervening weeks. And so that seems to be quite interesting because, you know, a lot of people just assume that kids are going to take the easier option a lot of the time. A few weeks after that, again, so they get their marks back, and obviously those kids who have taken the easier test, they've done really well, so again, they're really smart. The kids who had taken the harder test probably hadn't done quite as well as you know, they had done in the first test, but still they were praised for being persistent, having a good attitude, taking a chance, all that kind of stuff. So then a few weeks later, they gave the kids a test that they knew that none of them would be able to handle. They actually, in essence, kind of set the kids up to fail, and they weren't that bothered about what score the kids got. They were more interested in watching their behaviours during the test. And so what they found was that the kids who had been praised for being really smart actually came up against this incredibly tricky test and very, very quickly threw their hands up in the air, became frustrated and gave up. Whereas the kids who had been praised for working hard and persisting, they actually reported enjoying the struggle and they worked for longer. They still didn't do particularly well on the test, but they persevered and they worked for longer than the group who had been told they're smart. And finally, they gave the kid, which was quite interesting, right? And then they finally gave the kids another test, which was the same standard of test that they gave right at the start. And what they found was quite interesting. Over a period of weeks, the group who had been praised for being really smart actually did worse on the same standard test just a few weeks later, whilst the group that had been praised for being working really hard and having a good attitude, they found that over a period of time, their performance on the same standard test actually really improved. So what it showed was that being praised for being smart actually made you less smart, which is really quite interesting because often we talk about, you know, praising kids and making sure they feel good about themselves and all this kind of stuff. But it turns out that it's actually really important what we praise. And praising kids for being smart, being intelligent, being natural, gifted, you know, all those words can actually have quite a detrimental impact on their ability to be so. So, one other thing was really quite interesting, that when these two groups of kids got together and spoke about their experiences, the group who had been praised for being really smart, who hadn't actually performed very smart, actually then lied. They lied about the scores they got to the other group. They lied about how much they cared about it. They lied about all manner of different things about their experiences because they didn't want to be seen as struggling. And so what Carol Dweck talks about is this idea that as soon as kids become able to evaluate themselves and really put value on their smartness or their ability or their talent, some of them become afraid of challenges. Dweck studied thousands of people from preschools on. It's breathtaking how many reject an opportunity to learn. It's as though they become afraid of not being smart. And as I said, you know, you see this in all different settings, and not just with kids. You see it with adults. There'll be lots of your colleagues, I should imagine, who you know are quite good at what they do, but because they're so intrinsically wrapped up in what they do, they don't want to challenge themselves for risk of failure, for risk of not appearing as good at the stuff that people think they're good at, that they really don't want to take those risks. So here are some of the behaviors between fixed and growth mindset. So in a fixed mindset, you avoid challenges. Whereas in a growth mindset, you actually seek them out. And not just, then this is an interesting one, because often we think that people in a growth mindset just embrace challenges. So you're sitting there doing well and you're waiting for somebody to present you with a challenge and then you do it. Yeah, that's an aspect of growth mindset. But those people who actively go out and seek out a challenge to push themselves beyond what they're already doing, that's a real sign of a growth mindset. Whereas a fixed mindset behavior is one, well, I avoid challenges. I don't want to take on a challenge because by definition, a challenge is something I can't already do, and if I can't already do it, there's a risk of failure associated with that. And obviously, because there is failure associated with it, those in a fixed mindset just give up in the face of a setback. They try once or twice and they give up, and you'll hear things like, "Oh, it never works for me," or "I'm not that kind of person," or "I've never been able to use technology," or "I've never been good at maths." Whereas those in a growth mindset persist in the face of setbacks. They keep picking themselves up and they try again. They try something different. They go and seek help. All those kind of things. Because one of the things in a growth mindset is that you actually revel in the struggle. You actually enjoy that feeling of doing something that you can't already do. It's kind of it's interesting because kids don't like struggling. Kids don't like that feeling of not being able to do something. If they don't get it immediately, they think that's bad. In fact, they think if they don't get something immediately, it means that they're done. Except what I try and point out, that feeling of not getting something is the first step to becoming smarter, right? If you only sit down and read or watch stuff or listen to stuff or try stuff that you can already do, then you're not actually going to get any smarter or any better at what it is you're trying to do. But the problem is, in schools, we kind of reward speed, we reward no mistakes, we reward performance, and that kind of undermines this idea that it's good to actually spend time struggling and getting things wrong. And then, of course, we've got the feedback. So those people in a fixed mindset don't listen to feedback. Whether they're good at something or whether they're bad at something, it bounces off. They either don't need to learn anymore or they don't think they can learn anymore. Whereas in a growth mindset, no matter how good you are at something, you're willing to take on feedback. You're willing to have somebody, for example, if you're a teacher, you're willing to have another teacher in the room and ask you questions about your practice. I don't know how common that is in your schools, but I go to a lot of schools where the thought of another adult in the classroom freaks teachers out. And I think that's a real shame because obviously it's a fairly isolated profession as it is. And there'll be a lot of benefit from having another professional in the room with you, talking about your practice and sharing ideas. And then finally is this idea of the success of others. In a fixed mindset, you can't stand it. You hate the fact that other people are successful, particularly if your idea of success is being the best. So if you're the smartest kid in the class and you get lots of pats on the back and certificates and badges and rewards from your parents for being the smartest kid in the class, by definition, every one of your friends' success is a threat to you because they're catching you up or they're going to take your place. Whereas in a growth mindset, you thrive off the success of others. You're inspired by the success of others, and it drives you, to improve yourself. And when I'm talking to people, I sort of say, if you're genuinely concerned about getting better at stuff, then you need to go and hang out with people who are smarter than you, or much better than you at what it is that you want to do. It's no good trying to be that big fish in the small pond if you want to get better at stuff, because that's not a recipe for growth or improvement. And I sort of reflect on, well, when do you see kids doing these things? When do you see kids embracing challenges, persisting in the face of setbacks, reveling in effort, getting great feedback, and enjoying the success of others? Well, one word: Minecraft. Why is it kids will fail over and over and over again at a video game and keep coming back for more, but fail once or twice in maths or English or science and give up? And if you look at those behaviors that we spoke about, Every single one of those are present when kids are gaming. The question is, how do we set up our classrooms and our schools and our communities to encourage the same kind of behaviors that game designers have so brilliantly captured? Now, obviously, we've got about, well, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes left to sort of explore that, so we're clearly not going to do it right now, but one aspect.
You can go a little over. Don't worry about it.
Okay. One of the implications of why kids game is, I speak a lot about engagement, and games get engagement right. Kids have got loads of autonomy. They get mastery mindsets. So games are all about continually improving in the same way we've just spoken about there. Those behaviours that games encourage, but crucially, there's a real deep. The purpose of games, more often than not, is whatever the gamer wants it to be. So we're taking the Minecraft example. Kids can build, they can create whatever they want, they can work in teams if they want, they can work on their own if they want, they can seek to complete Minecraft if they want, or they can just seek to create their own worlds. And the beauty of Minecraft is, which sets it apart from a lot of other games, is it handed all creativity over to the gamer. And so if you play Minecraft, or if your kids play Minecraft, you'll see that there's lots of what they call mods, which the gaming community were able to add to and develop Minecraft as a community project, if you like, as opposed to just one person saying this is the only way that Minecraft can be played. And I like to use Minecraft or gaming as an analogy for education. If we're really serious about kids driving their learning and taking ownership of their learning and understanding that no matter how good or how much they struggle today, that they can improve, then we need to consider what a co-created experience looks like, and that's contextual. That's not just saying, right, well, what works in Sydney, Australia is going to work in Texas, or it's going to work in Iceland, or it's going to work in Portugal. It's professionals understanding their context, their community, and their kids, and giving a little autonomy as and when it's required to help kids drive their learning. But one thing I think that we could consider is what impact does grades have on learning, and in particular to shutting down perhaps some of those behaviours that we've spoken about. So there's been lots of research about the impacts of grades, and I'm just going to share very quickly a little bit of it with you. Imagine for a second that you're all in my grade 9 English class, and we've spent a few weeks reading Shakespeare, because what grade 9 kid doesn't like Shakespeare? So we've done some Shakespeare, and I want to assess your ability at understanding Shakespeare, what you've got from it, and so I get you all to write me a sonnet. So you go away over the weekend and you write me a sonnet, and perhaps you get your parents to help and all that kind of stuff, and then you hand it in to me. And researchers wanted to look at, well, what impact does the feedback that teachers give to kids, what impact does that have on kids' desire to write a better sonnet? And so what they did is they take the most common form of feedback, which is grades and a comment, and they wanted to see what impact that has. So the first thing they did was they thought, right, let's get rid of the comment, let's just see what impact grades have on learning. So imagine we've got 3 kids, I don't know, Jane, John, and Fred, right? And so Jane hands in her sonnet, I look at it, and I give her 20 out of 20, hand it back to her. John hands me in his, gives 15 out of 20, hand it back to him, and Fred gives me his and give him 7 out of 20. Now, whether I'm giving him a number, 20 out of 20, or a grade, an A or a C or an E, that doesn't really matter. The principle's the same. What impact does that have on those 3 kids' desire to write a better sonnet? Well, it turns out not much, because Jane gets 20 out of 20 and realizes that she's done everything that she could possibly do. Some kids, of course, will get it and think, oh, they do want to write better sonnets on the back of their 20 out of 20 because they think that they might get published and they might be able to make money out of writing and that. But most kids will go 20 out of 20, sweet, what's next, move on. In fact, they quickly realized that if William Shakespeare himself was in my class, he could only get 20 out of 20. So that clearly means that my sonnet is as good as one of Shakespeare's. John gets 15 out of 20, and if he's like most kids, he goes, sweet, that keeps everyone off my back. If he does want to get a better mark, it's not because he wants to write a better sonnet, it's because he wants to beat his mates. And if in your class, the first question you get when you hand work back is, or the first question you hear is, what did you get? Then you know that that's the driving force. You know that it's a culture of performance and competition rather than a culture of learning. And poor old Fred, who gets 7 out of 20, well, I don't know what schools you work at, but I've not seen too many kids get 7 out of 20 and jump on their mobile phone or their cell phone and say, hey, Mum, cancel everything tonight because tonight we work on sonnets. The fact is, someone who gets 7 out of 20 just thinks they're dumb and they don't want to try and they don't want to have another go because why would I do that? I'm only going to be told I'm dumb again. So what they've found is that if we, what happens if we just give comments? Let's get rid of the grades for a second. And specifically, not just any old comments, not praise, not ego-centered stuff, but actually let's give these kids 3 ways in which they can improve. Now this is interesting because I've not had to do that for Jane before, because Jane's got 20 out of 20, and as a teacher it's easy for me to give them, oh, well done Jane, 20 out of 20, best effort yet, let's, I don't know, put this on the wall, right? Let's send this home to your mum, they'll be so proud. But now I've got to give her 3 ways in which this could be a better sonnet. And, you know, that might push me as an educator, and I might need to go and reach outside my organisation to find people who can help me help this kid. That in itself puts me as a teacher into a growth mindset. John gets 3 ways to improve instead of, you know, just getting the 15 out of 20 and seeing what his mates have got. He's just got 3 ways to improve. And crucially, Fred gets 3 ways to improve, not 10, not a side of A4 paper, because that does the same thing as just giving them a 7 out of 20. So if we can give 3 ways in which these kids could write better sonnets, what they found over time is that you create this culture of learning, that, you know, there is no what did you get as the first question, because nobody got anything. They just got 3 ways to improve. Now I do say over time, because if you stop grading kids, everyone freaks out. The kids freak out, your colleagues freak out, and the parents freak out. So it's really important how we communicate that, and one of the ways you can communicate it would be, you know, on your blog or whatever, and put the research forward. And just Google Dylan William or people like Helen Timpley or John Hattie, people like that, and you can start putting together a fairly compelling case as to why perhaps we should stop grading, or not stop grading, but maybe just reduce the grading. We don't need to grade kids 3 times a day in order to, well, I don't know why we grade kids 3 times a day, because all the research says it just, you know, stops learning. But and it's quite interesting, of course, because we don't often just give grades or just comments. We give grades and comments. So we spend all this time writing our comments, but the research from Dylan Williams shows time and time again, if you're doing that and then you put a grade next to it, you've effectively wasted your time, because kids don't read the comments. And what we find is you've got kids who do so well that they don't feel they need to learn anymore, whilst at the other end of the spectrum we've got kids who feel that they can't learn anymore. And both of those are classic fixed mindset behaviours and thinking processes. So my challenge is, what could you tinker with in your classroom? Grades might be one of them, but what could you tinker with in order to get kids into more of a Minecraft mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset? So, if you'd like to chat more with me, I know you're going to chat now on this thing. Shelley's going to ask questions or whatever, but that's an open invitation. Hit me up through Twitter, or that's my website, and you can find loads of different things on there around mindset, around engagement, and around well-being. But thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to chatting some more. Cheers.
Well, that was really wonderful, quick and sweet. A lot of people agreed on Minecraft, and we had a really good comment to your presentation where Ms. Poindexter, she says, games like Minecraft empower students to control their learning. We need to develop environments where students desire to be responsible for their personal growth.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think for me that's a lot of what personalizing learning should be about. You know, it's for me, personalizing learning or individualizing learning isn't having a teacher in front of 30-odd kids doing something different for each of those kids. It's actually about giving kids and educating kids the tools, the mindsets and the skill sets in order to take what's being delivered and create, like you say, some kind of ownership and some kind of relevance for them in their life. And I guess the point is that, there's going to be some times when what we're teaching isn't going to have any relevance, and we've got to be okay with that. Because just as, we as teachers, I bet we don't look at every single lesson that we are going to teach in a year and go, oh, fantastic, every lesson here is a winner. And we chose to do this, so I don't know if it's fair to expect kids to come in and engage in an authentic sense in every single lesson. I think schools have got to be okay with that.
And you had some more questions too. So, Matt, well, this is Matt Pratt. He says slapping a number on something is much faster than the narrative.
Yeah, it is much faster, and the issue there is, of course, well, what do we base our decisions on? I think a lot of decisions in schools are made on what's most efficient, what's most cost effective, and all that, and not necessarily what's best for learning. So maybe if we were more strategic about how many pieces of work or how many assignments that kids would be expecting feedback on from the teacher, we could probably make better use of our time. I mean, like I say, what's the point? The irony is, of course, we spend so much time writing comments and then waste that time by putting a grade on it. The other thing to look at, of course, is can we teach kids how to give feedback and how to accept feedback. So things like, you might want to Google expeditionary learning by Ron Berger. That's a big movement in the US, which does a lot of peer critiquing and teaching kids as young as grade 1 how to offer feedback to their friends in order to improve learning in the classroom.
And here's a big thought-provoking question from Peggy and Ms. Poindexter, and they say, how do we get students to the growth mindset?
Yeah, so that's a good question, because I've seen a lot of Twitter chats and whatnot around how do we do this, and unfortunately it often gets distilled down to let's have an inspirational poster on the wall, and that's obviously, there's a lot of superficial approaches to this this whole body of work. And Carol Dweck herself talks about, she's worried about the McDonald'sization of mindset. This idea that we can just do it fast and quick and a one size fits all and can roll it out. For me, I think it's a lot about mentoring kids, sitting down, and because you've got to change their narrative. If you've got a kid who's, I don't know, 15 or 16 sitting down with you, whose only experience of school is a negative one, then an inspirational poster or an inspirational video isn't going to cut it. They need to have adults in their life, and maybe it is only just one, you, who can sit down and slowly work with them and coach them. There's a great body of work around coaching that can help. It's not about telling kids they need a growth mindset. It's about empowering them to find it themselves. So in terms of how do you do it, if you were to go back to those 5 behaviors: embracing challenges, persisting in the face of setbacks, reveling in the challenge, and taking on feedback, and being inspired by the success of others, the question is, for the kids who you work with, and presumably you know them better than I do, I've never met them, what can you tinker with? What can you do to set up an environment which encourages those behaviors, as opposed to puts them down at the other end? So if your classroom is one based on performance, competition, and anxiety, I'd bet $50 that most of your kids would be in a fixed mindset about their learning. If it was away from that, if it was more a culture of learning and continual improvement and growth in the same way that games are, and yet games have that competitive element, but often, a lot of kids are playing for themselves, and they get that constant feedback as to how they're improving, etc., etc. So if you can tinker with that as you know best for your context and your community, then just try stuff and see what happens. But read up on it, get some research, see what's working in schools down the road, see what's working in schools across the world or in different not different planets. I don't think there's schools on different planets, but the idea that let's take what's working and see if it works for us, or tinker at the edges and see what works for us.
Brett Bjornstad says, I've never heard these ideas put forth so eloquently before.
That's very nice of you, thank you.
And a lot of different people are saying that there is a lot of testing. One teacher, Annabella, she says our ninth graders were doing in Portugal, they get their testing earlier and earlier every year, and she said our ninth graders were doing Cambridge exam for 2 years as a pilot, and next year it's going to be compulsory and interfere in their progress.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we've got to be mindful of is that we have, we may as well call a spade a spade. We've got the testing economy, if you like, is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and so that's obviously quite a powerful factor. And we need to be mindful of the fact of whether we allow testing to control education or not. And I know in some countries, it's this. There's more of a debate around accountability and raising standards and all this kind of stuff, as opposed to actually learning. And the problem is, we talk about we talk about standardization as being the way to raising standards, and we've got to be quite clear. Do we want kids who perform really well on tests, or do we want kids who perform really well in life? I'll just give you one example of what I mean by that. So Finland, who I'm guessing most people in education have heard of, they've got issues. So they do quite well in tests, right? We know that because we're told that we've got to be more like Finland. But what do we make of the fact that in Finland the youth unemployment runs at 20%? Now, in Australia, for example, youth unemployment runs at about 12% nationally. So what's going on in Finland, where 20% of their kids, once they leave school, or between the ages of 15 and 19, are either not in education or aren't employed? Similarly, what do we make of the fact that around 35% of kids in Finland don't actually feel that they belong, or they aren't happy at school? And what implication does this then have on their overall levels of well-being, both as an adolescent and then later in life as an adult? What do these things mean? And my son's just got up to play Minecraft on his iPad, so I'm just going to have to say no, because he's going to take the bandwidth off me. Don't touch it. Come over here, Jax. Come over here. Come and say hello. This is my 7-year-old son. This is Jackson. Say hello.
Hi, Jackson.
Hello.
It's great to see you.
You can't hear that. So just give me a second, then you can play. Okay. So it's early in the morning here. So the first thing he does before he goes to school is play a bit of Minecraft or Dragon City or something. But anyway, what were we talking about? Yeah. So it's just about, okay, obviously certain countries are doing well on tests, but what does it mean? There's a bigger picture at stake, and there's the danger that if we only focus on testing and league tables, that obviously we're missing the bigger picture. I think as educators, we need to take back the education debate, and whether that's through blogging, whether it's through conversations in our own community, we need to really enhance what I call a culture of learning, as opposed to a culture of performance and competition.
Well, I think that's really great what you're saying. A lot of people are really they're tweeting a lot about that. I mean, chatting a lot about that. And Nellie Deutsch said that too. She had made the comment before that it was about. She started that conversation when you mentioned it. She had said about the money and how we need to change the culture from learning instead of the money.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all tied in. I mean, I know you've got charter schools in the States, and there's academies in the UK, and there's a big private v public school kind of divide in Australia. And a lot of the time, the debate and the the rule, the law is about money, you know, and that's kind of what I was alluding to before. So many decisions in education are made based around money, efficiency, and not about learning, and I think that's incredibly sad, really. But that is the system we've got, and my challenge is to educators to do whatever we can within those boundaries, because we aren't, unfortunately, the big publishers and all those kinds of people who run the testing, they're not going anywhere. So we need to be able to innovate within those boundaries that we've been given, because if our argument is, well, we can't do this until testing goes, or until politicians stop using education as a political poker chip, if that's our point, then we're never going to innovate, because those things aren't actually going to they're not going to disappear anytime soon. So my challenge is, yes, challenge the system, but also try and innovate within the boundaries of it in order to get the best out of it for your kids.
And Brett says that it's really nice looking at the whole picture instead of the soundbite we were meant to hear. And you put Tree Finland, and it's one of the reasons why too, because we just had a keynote, a closing keynote yesterday was Hawaii on Finland, and he was looking at a positive view of Finland. So it's quite nice to get different, pictures.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've got a positive. Don't get me wrong, I've got a positive view of what Finland are doing, but they do some good things well. But it's a case of, let's not just, bow down, Wayne's World style to different educational systems, because look at Finland, very little poverty issues, no second language issues, no indigenous, well, a very small indigenous culture. So in Australia, we have all, an indigenous culture which has been essentially ostracized since white settlement. We've got massive poverty issues, and we've got English as a second language. Lots of migrant families and whatnot, and that obviously has an issue on an impact on your education. And I dare say that's the same for a lot of people working in school systems who are listening to this talk now. In Finland, not such a big issue in each of those three areas. So it would be a bigger story if they weren't top of the league tables, to be quite frank, because they've got a pretty good start.
Well, there's more and more comments, but I saw you with your son, and we're gonna go let you spend some time with him.
My daughter's just come as well now. My daughter.
Oh, she's coming too. The great thing about this is, if we would have seen you live, we don't get to see the real Dan, the family man. So that's great.
What'd you say?
All right.
Well, thank you so much for spending your time with us, and they really appreciate it. There's so many positive comments in the chat, and you'll find a lot on Twitter as well. And thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you very much for having me.